kind of get your opinion on is the AFL Magic Round. There's obviously a bit of talk that the AFL looking at bringing in a Magic Round, which is similar to the NRL concept of having all 9 games in one city, one state, at one arena. First of all, just take me through maybe what you think about it. Is it a good initiative? Is it, where should it be played? I know Adelaide and Sydney are up there with probably the 2 leading cities at the moment to host it. But yeah, where do you sit with it?
Yeah, it's NRL do it very well. They use the Suncorp Stadium up here. I mean, my only concern is always around nine games on one ground. It's always a little bit interesting to see if the grounds can hold up. Obviously, we want the weather to be good. When it was up here this year, it was rainy and it was horrible. So the ground got pretty chewed up at the end of that. And that's just more the field. So if a field like Adelaide Oval can stand it, then so be it, and the weather's pretty good. It's probably best to do it earlier in the season in Adelaide because the weather tends to be still pretty dry until the wet season. So, yeah, I think as long as they're happy to do it anywhere, you've just got to get the timing right, and you want the players to play in pretty good conditions, mainly for the ground. The fans, it is great for the fans because they all descend in Adelaide or Sydney, and for Adelaide or Sydney to get it, particularly Adelaide at the moment, who look like the front runners, it's awesome for tourism. Adelaide and Sydney, unlike Melbourne, really could benefit from more Aussie rules footy in it at one place, where Melbourne tends to get a lot of travellers and a lot of spectators flying in and out every weekend, so they don't really need it, even though they've got the couple of grounds they can use, which wouldn't be an issue. But yeah, hopefully Adelaide gets it. Hopefully it's probably in early May, and that'll be pretty good.
Collingwood, obviously one of the big playmakers in this trade period. Obviously we know that we've spoken about they parted ways with Grundy and Henry, but brought in Tom Mitchell, Billy Frampton, Bobby Hill, and Dan McStay. Just talk me through what you think and what you thought of their trade period in 2022.
Well, clearly a destination club. If you're a Collingwood fan, you'd be pretty happy with that. Dan McStay up here, I've been always pretty critical of Dan because he drops too many marks and he wants a hefty price. So if he can fix that up, and I know Craig will be all over him down there, Fly, with the way he plays and the type of role. He can play forward, obviously, as a marking forward or a third big. And then you've got him, he can pinch it in the ruck if needed. Outside of losing Grundy, they've still got some quality, those 2 ruckmen that they can use. Cox can go forward and go into the ruck. He's big enough. He should be playing ruck. The other part of it is probably Bobby Hill has been maligned a bit from his club where he was because they just think he's a bit lazy. So he won't be able to get away with being lazy at Collingwood. He's got to train hard in the pre-season. And if he can provide that spark and that goal sense, you can never have enough quick players who are skillful, and I think he's a great addition to any club because he's got more upside. Like if he can work hard, he can show what his wares are with his skill set, and guys like him under Craig McRae can go into the midfield and provide good run and dash. Mitchell's an interesting one because of his age. He's certainly a ball magnet. He gets in the right spots. He's a great extricator of the ball, so he's always going to deliver the guys around him who are probably a little bit quicker than what he is with his age. You've got Scott Pendlebury as well that goes through there, but the rest of their midfield is quite young and very talented. So I think Craig, with everything that he's got, he's starting to get this balance. He knows he needs more depth in his list. The list outside of the top 22, even he said, is pretty light on. So their year with their best 22s, they're a top 14. They might go a little bit backwards in the win-loss. They won a lot of close games. So it doesn't always happen year to year, but they're starting to get a squad. It's going to take, if you're a Collingwood fan, it's going to take that 3 or 4 years for Craig to get the players in. Where you look at a side like St Kilda, who couldn't do anything in the trade period because no one wants to go there. All of a sudden now, a new coach, which is one of their old coaches. And, Ross Lyon is very much a player's coach. He doesn't like the media that much, but he'll be a far less grumpier person. So in the next 3 or 4 years, you'll see St Kilda be able to attract the talent that they need, because outside of really they've only got 1 or 2 players that probably can play outside of Max King, who needs to get stronger in the marking contest. But outside of that, they're going to be stronger and stronger every year, but he's going to get more out of his players. So Craig, big tick. Other lists are quite strong. So, Carlton and these kind of lists, they don't need a lot of top-up talent, even though they've got to move a couple of players on here and there. So very impressed with Collingwood and pretty disappointed if you're a St Kilda fan in the trade period, that's for sure.
Now, speaking of Geelong, as you said, finally got that elusive premiership that Chris Scott found in his first season in 2011 and now in 2022. Now they brought in Tanner Bruin, Jack Bowes and Ollie Henry, so three very talented young players. Obviously lost their skipper Joel Selwood to retirement. Do you think they can go back-to-back in 2023?
Oh, definitely. That list has actually gotten stronger. I'm not too worried about it. I mean, with Joel retiring, but he wasn't playing every game. He certainly wasn't the player he was many years before that, and they were arresting him in danger at times. So their strength and their back line, their midfield and their forward line, it's pretty much as good as any other group in the country. So they're very strong across all lines, and I think the way that they play in their defensive side is pretty much the best that any team is producing at the moment. So not only can they score, but they're very difficult to score against. Outside of, most teams against them, you saw the grand final. Sydney, 8 goals down, chipping sideways. You're never going to score doing that against Geelong. They set up too well. So for them, they are, again, as they do every year, they're an amazing club. They've been the best club season to season without the premierships. I know they won 2 in 11 years, but they've been in finals pretty much every year bar one. So they're a very strong club, and I can see them just winning anywhere at any time. They've won, what did they win? 16 straight or something to win the flag. So they're certainly often it rolls into the next year. So, rounds 1 to 10, they could go undefeated. Just never know. But it's hard to stay up. They are certainly the team that you put money on right now, and back-to-back is hard to do. But they have the list. There's lots of teams who are right there too on their day. So they're not going to have it their own way. It's going to be a tough year. There'll be a lot of close games. A lot of teams will just miss out in the 8. So it's going to be an exciting 2023.
Yeah, so speaking on that back to, obviously you won a 3-peat with the Lions in the early 2000s. What is the main difference? Obviously there's plenty of things that go into work. Obviously big pre-season following a premiership and then going into the next year. But what do you think the main difference is, or change, or I guess, improvement from a club that goes from winning a premiership to then backing it up and doing it next year? Because obviously you go from the hunter to the hunted. Everyone's looking to beat you guys, knock you off your mantle. What do you think Geelong need to do to ensure they have another genuine crack at going back-to-back?
I don't think they'll have a problem with the sheer fact that they're going to be the team that everyone wants to beat. They want to beat them this year. They want to beat them the year before. They're always a very tough team to come up against. I think their consistency in the year-to-year has been quite amazing. They play a lot of games at home. They're very difficult to beat at home, and that there is a real fortress for them, as it was for us up here. I think in the end, with your list and your age profile, like for us, we had the best players in our list turning 24, 25, 26, 27. That window there, if you've got your best players in that window playing their best footy, which they generally do because they're in the prime of their career, that's the key. It's the age profile. That's why Geelong, being much older, list generally has got to keep stocking up with those younger players who are sort of 22 to 23 coming into their prime, and that's where you get the improvement across the board. Players who are older generally are pretty consistent. Like their best and worst games, not that far apart. But of course, that only ever lasts for so long because eventually, Father Time catches up with everyone, and you just can't keep doing it forever. But with the way the game is, the way the speed of the game is, and the off-field physios and masseurs and everything else you get, they're playing to a long, lot older age group now. They can retire sort of mid-30s as opposed to late 20s, early 30s like it used to be. So the age and the versatility is not really a big issue. But if you've got a lot of players who are very good in that 23 to 28, man, you're gonna have some good footy ahead of you. So that's a real key.
And wins, but obviously falling short of finals and still yet to make finals. Is there a retention problem at the Gold Coast? Obviously, we see players come and go quite frequently. Tom Lynch, Dion Prestia is just two big names. Stephen May as well, gone on to other clubs to win premierships. Are they struggling to hold on to some of these players who turn out to be stars of the competition?
Always, yeah. They're probably the club that gets more talent taken out of it than any other club because of the location and the culture. So Stewie Dew has certainly turned that place around. I mean, this year they should be thinking finals. They are a finals contending team next year. While there are, most teams should be thinking finals, barring a couple who are really looking to improve. I think just Gold Coast, the way their list is, the way the players are playing for Stewie, the way Stewie's got the whole culture of the Suns just up and going, and the way they play, I think they've got the talent to do that. And, you know, in the end, if they miss out in finals, it would be more of a shock because they are very tough to beat at home, and they took a lot of teams, a lot of good teams at home to the wire, and they'll beat and they'll surprise a few people. They just got to get a little bit better on the road. They snagged 3 or 4 on the road, you know, because they're good enough to do that. That's the real key to building into finals. It's not just being good at home, and I think that's where, you know, you'll start to see the improvement out of Stewie Dew and the Suns for next year. And that, you know, top 8 every day of the week, they should be top 8. And if they fall short, it'll be something catastrophic, injuries or something. So their retention, though, in this last 2 years has been terrific. They've lost very few bits of talent. Don't get me wrong, you'd like them all to be there, but yeah, you've got players that have left. They've left GWS and gone on to win premierships, but it happens at every club. You know, you can't keep everyone, but you've also got to manage your list. They've been a little bit average with a couple of players on big money that they had to move on. So they just got to be a little bit careful not to play overs because, you know, players, they say, oh, I'm going to go home. And that's really the biggest problem with the Gold Coast. But as it goes forward, they've got a big academy. They've got a lot of talent coming through. I know there's a lot of kids in that academy that are going to come into the Suns. They're from the Gold Coast. They're going to play for the Gold Coast, and I guarantee they'll stay at the Gold Coast.
You know, GWS, it seemed like there was a mini exodus. You know, lost Tim Turner and Jacob Hopper to Richmond, Tanner Bruin, Geelong, and Bobby Hill to Collingwood. They brought in Toby Bedford, another small force. They're kind of a like for like with Bobby Hill. Obviously, they're in the middle of a rebuild. New coach, Adam Kingsley. So what does he have to bring in to the club immediately to kind of get that place on the right track and heading forward into 2023?
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see the game plan he wants to put in. Like, he's been an assistant for a long time, so he finally gets his crack at it. You know, the players have to buy in and support him. It's a big job. So, look, I don't think they're good enough on the talent point of view this next few years, just with everything that has to be done and rejigged. But, you know, they'll be competitive at times, and I'm sure Adam could surprise you and play a game like Collingwood, but they just don't have the list to be a top 8 team. So in the end, they've got to get their draft picks right, and their trading. You know, no one has really done well trading in to GWS, but they've certainly traded out all right. So, you know, they were brilliant at getting picks and just keep stocking up their list. So it was always going to be a case they're going to lose some players at some stage because they've just got a big list, a good list, an exciting list. But then, of course, you've got salary cap restrictions. You can't pay everyone top dollar, and when you do, you end up like they are. They are just going to have to grind away for a couple of years and try and get the wins and get the talent in. And, you know, they're probably 4 or 5 years away from being again, you know, up the top.
I actually noticed they had 11 players on their 2019 grand final side. You all good?
Yeah.
Yeah. 11 players from their 2019 grand final side, obviously losing 3 of them just in this last stretch. But they also got 4 picks in this year's draft. Can they turn this club around quite quickly? Kind of like a Collingwood, kind of surprise the competition, you know, obviously rising from 17th to 4th in 2022, the Pies. Can the Giants kind of turn it around quickly? Because they seem to still have a good core group of players. They've got Josh Kelly, Cornelio, Green, Nick Haynes. Phil Davis is still there. Obviously, he's nearing toward the end of his career. They're going to bring in, you know, 4 young guns. You know, arguably the 4 of the best talent in the land. Can they turn it around quickly in maybe just say 2024 or 2025?
Yeah, I don't think next year. I mean, the reality is they've got too big a gap. They've got really experienced players now getting towards the late 20s, but then you've got this injection of talent at 18, 19, 20, and it still takes that 4 years of pre-seasons and playing. Like, you do get 1 out of there that'll have a great breakout first year. There should be 2 of the 4 should be good enough to go round 1 next year. They'll get lots of games, but they're still not seasoned, and that's the reality. And by the time those, you know, Kelly and these kind of guys, they, you know, Phil Davis, obviously, he's probably News last year, next year. I mean, those guys are going to move out of the system. So I think the next 3 or 4 years, trade some good players in if you can, who are sort of that 21, 22, and then try and keep going to the draft, because that's the only really quick way to rebuild, but it still takes that 3 or 4 years because the talent just takes that long to mature. It's a bit of a shame, I know, but you're going to get good games out of the kids. You're going to get great games against with the experienced players. 11 of them, played in a grand final. It's not really the end of the world, but with that extra 7 players and their gap being so young, and you're going to throw it around a bit, it does make it hard. So that's where they're really going to struggle, I think, just with the age profile, and that's no surprise to anyone. And I think Adam will be okay with that and ready for that, and he's just got to hang in there and just keep giving them confidence to improve.
Now Hawthorn, obviously kind of big players in the sense that they've lost 3 very experienced players, O'Meara, Mitchell and Jack Gunston. It seems like Sam Mitchell's keen to just regenerate and kind of just bring in a lot of young talent, improving and growing up within the space of, 3-4 years apart. Obviously only kept with Chad Wingard and Luke Bruce. They lost Ben McAvoy as well to retirement. Have they left themselves too thin on the experience side?
Oh, definitely. Like Hawthorn they're going to be competitive in games, and they're a hard team to beat on their day, particularly in Tassie. They're very good there. But I think with them, just the way Sam wants to build his own team, so those older guys were always in the gun. Unless he really, really loves you and can see you fit into a team the next few years, then you're probably going to get moved on. And he did. To his credit, he's going to go to the draft. He's going to try and get some players out of trade. So, they are bottom 8, bottom 4 team. If they play really well, they could probably sneak up to sort of 10th or so. They just got to build that talent. But no doubt with Sam, some of the game plans, some of the teams that they play against, they match up well, but they've still got a big chunk of work to do with their talent. Losing those players, just experience-wise and consistency-wise, is very difficult to replace. They'll get players in, but in the end, he's done what's best for himself and the club, Sam Mitchell, by getting the ability to attract players, younger players that he can mould into his own team that, in 3 or 4 years is going to be, pushing the top 4 again.
Well, yeah, so we'll talk about who they brought in. Carl Amon from Port Adelaide, he's an established player. I think he was All-Australian last year, All-Australian squad. Lloyd Meek from the Dockers and Cooper Stevens from the Cats. Probably those two, later two, haven't had a fair crack at it at AFL level yet, but seem like they do have potential. What do you think those 3 will bring into the Hawthorn side in 2023?
Yeah, well, he's obviously looking for a bit of run and pace. That's what and skill. So, Amon is not as, I'd like to see him win a bit more of his ball. He's got to be a bit stronger in the contest, but I've no doubt Sam will get the best out of him. And you can see with what he's trying to do, he's developing runners who can keep the ball, and that means to me that his game plan is going to be move it quick and try and emulate a far more aggressive style of game. And I think that'll suit his current crop as he moves them in. So the next 3 or 4 years, I'd be saying anyone with speed and skill, man, you're going to be playing, and I bet you those guys outside of injury will be playing round 1, all their recruits. The coach just always does that. He wants to get them in. It feels like he's, they're his, and he wants them to work. So he gives them more opportunity.
Speaking of Melbourne, they obviously brought in Brodie Grundy, big name, Lockie Hunter from the Dogs, and Josh Schache. Lost Sam Wheaton, Luke Jackson, Jaden Hunt, and Toby Bedford. Do you think their inclusions offset their outgoings? Obviously, Grundy for Jackson, like Schache, Wiedemann, Lockie Hunter for Jaden Hunt, who has played wing, and Toby Bedford didn't really get a fair crack, I guess, at Melbourne. Do you think, their kind of ins outweigh their outgoings, or do you see it kind of like they've lost a little bit in who they've lost over the trade period?
Yeah, I think with Melbourne and their list, to lose Jackson's a huge loss. I don't really think you can replace him. Just his ability around the ground. He's a link player. He gets after the ball. His second efforts are wonderful. Grundy's a good player. Obviously, if he's healthy, he can provide a good run. But he's such a different dynamic player. He'll sort of grind away and get touches and follow up. So he's probably later in games and quarters, he really does come to his own, where Jackson's so much more a burst kind of player. And no doubt that with, Hunter and Schache, it gives them more options and depth. Those guys are sort of, they're going to have to really improve to be on, or in their best 22, Melbourne. So it gives them the the ability to have depth, but it doesn't really give them any more firepower, because those guys, I think they'll get the best out of them. New game plan. Dogs is different. Obviously, you know, everywhere you come from is slightly different. And Melbourne really set up well defensively, but when, as you saw late in the season, a few injuries, they didn't really get their defensive game going, weren't able to score as efficiently as they like. They are dynamite forward, great midfield, really strong defence. So I can see them being very strong again. I don't think they're missing much as far as, because they've got so much talent everywhere else, you know, premiership team from a couple of years ago, or last year as it was. So they're going to be very strong again. And I think their inclusions are pretty much to cover for what they've lost. I don't think they've lost too much as far as possessions, if you look across the stats and the options. So, you know, they've got there's a lot to like. And I think late in the year, just those last few weeks, they just all of a sudden didn't have the game that they wanted to. So it's a very strange. I think they'll bounce back pretty hard.
Now, Brodie Grundy is obviously quite almost a certainty to start, given the fact that hopefully he's fit for Melbourne's sake. Will Hunter and Shaki start in the best 22 or the first 23 in round 1 next year?
They're good enough, but I think it's going to be interesting to see what role that, that Simon Goodwin wants to put him in. You know, Shaki's been a bit of an enigma. He's played back, he's played forward, he's played ruck. He hasn't really dominated a position, so he's going to have to work at his craft to try and hold down a spot. There's no doubt, like, Hunter's just great, you know, reader of the game. He's a good kick. Like, he's got a lot to like. He can find space. So if he can find his niche on the wing or the halfback flank where he can get in time and space, like, he's a good user, which will suit Melbourne's game plan. So Grundy needs to obviously win the tap and get after it, and then go forward and kick goals. And that's really, we just don't know what we're going to get with him, because last year, Brodie, you know, being so injured, he's had pretty much 12 months off footy. He's going to have to come back into a very slick lineup, and you know, Grundy will play, but, you know, I think he'll be given more time than the others. I think the others will have to just be straight on the gas from pre-season, play well in the pre-season competition, and then get a gig at round 1 and try and hold their spot, because, you know, they can be good. Their good is very good, and their bad is still pretty bad. So they need to find the consistency. And in Melbourne, you just won't last if you can't fulfil the role every week at a pretty high standard.
Don't support the AFLW? Unbelievable.